Hello, my name is Chris Law. I'm a postdoc at the University of Washington and American Museum of Natural History. And today I'm going to talk about carnivoran body shape evolution. So one of the most distinctive patterns across the tree of life is the diversity of different body shapes. And several researchers have quantified the major axes of body shape variation in primarily squamates and fishes. And these studies often find that body elongation is the primary axis of body shape evolution. And body elongation has repeatedly evolved across many vertebrate clades, allowing some clades to exhibit novel feeding and locomotory behaviors and functions. And these studies have also revealed that most vertebrates can evolve more elongate bodies through multiple pathways, including reducing the body depth, elongating the head, or lengthening the body axis by increasing individual vertebral lengths or adding additional vertebrae to the body. And we see these patterns of body elongation and those underlying processes that led to these extreme phenotypes across almost all major clades of vertebrates. However, one group that is clearly missing from all of this are the mammals. And sadly, we have yet to witness any snake-like or eel-like mammal. And that's primarily because of two reasons. First, there is greater metabolic challenges imposed by the increased surface area to volume ratio. And second, mammals are constrained to about 30 precaudal vertebrae. Nevertheless, despite these challenges, there are still some elongate mammals such as weasels. And these animals obviously aren't snake-like elongate, but still for centuries, weasels and other mustelids such as otters and martens have all been qualitatively described as elongate. However, they were never really quantified, and just how much more elongate they are compared to other mammals wasn't really known. So as part of my PhD, I previously quantified body elongation in these weasels, as well as other mustelids, and found that a subclade of these mustelids exhibited an evolutionary shift towards more elongate bodies compared to the rest of the clade. And I also found that this same mustelid subclade also exhibited increased clade carrying capacity, which led to an increase in species richness versus all the rest of the mustelids. And these results suggest that maybe body elongation was this sort of innovation that facilitated this increase in species richness. And these results also indicates that there can be quite a bit of diversity in body shapes even within a single family of the mustelids. Of course, mustelids and other mustelids are just one of many clades within the mammalian order Carnivora. In fact, there are over 280 described species of carnivorans, including animals that everybody knows like lions, bears, wolves, civets, hyenas, and so on. And this group is incredibly ecologically and morphologically diverse, ranging across all continents and all known biomes. And lots of studies have examined carnivoran body size, which ranges from the 200-gram least weasel all the way to the 4,000-kilogram southern elephant seal. However, little attention has been paid to the other aspect of carnivoran body plans, and that's their body shape. And looking through pictures of different carnivorans, one could suspect that this group is also pretty diverse in their body shapes. For example, you can qualitatively say that this big, robust-looking brown bear looks very different compared to the small, elongate weasel. And similarly, you can also then start to ask questions pertaining to how similar or different ecological traits may affect the evolution of different body shapes in carnivores. And lastly, you can also then examine how species across different clades may have converged onto similar body plans, such as body elongation in weasels, mongoose, civets, and genets. So clearly, there are lots of interesting questions pertaining to the diversity of body shapes in carnivorans. However, for this talk, I'm primarily focused on just providing the baseline understanding of body shape diversity in this clade. Specifically, I first asked just how much or how diverse are body shapes between carnivoran families? And second, what is or how does body size affect body shape variation? And lastly, I tested to see which skeletal components contribute the most to body shape variation across the entire clade. So to do all of that, I quantified body shapes using the head body elongation ratio, or ER. And I calculated ER by adding the head length with the total body length of each individual and dividing it by the rib length as a proxy for body depth. I also calculate the axial elongation ratio of each vertebral region and the head elongation ratio so that we can actually see which components contribute the most to body shape variation across carnivora. So I quantified body shapes from 685 specimens across 207 species, which is about 74% of the total diversity and encompasses all 16 carnivoran families. And I use specimens held at natural history museums across the country, which are a great resource for this type of work. And then I used phylogenetic comparative methods for my analyses with the most recent mammal phylogeny published in 2019 by Upham et al. So first, looking at body shape diversity, here's a simple violin plot of ER of the 16 carnivoran families. So we can quantitatively say that there is quite a bit of body shape variation both between and within these carnivoran families. Bears exhibit the lowest variation, which is unsurprising considering that all bears kind of look similar. Everything from a panda to a polar bear all exhibit that bear-like body plan. In contrast, the mustelids exhibit the greatest diversity in body shapes, ranging from that robust-looking American badger all the way to those elongate weasels. And lastly, if anybody ever asks you what is the most average-looking carnivoran, you can now confidently say that it is probably a bobcat, which had an ER that was equivalent to the average of all carnivorans. So clearly, again, there's great variation in body shapes between these carnivoran families. But now the question remains, how did this variation accumulate? Under predictions of Brownian motion, we would predict that body shape variation should accumulate proportionally to time, as well as with increased rate of body shape evolution. And related, we can also predict that body shape variation should increase with increasing species richness. So running these linear regressions, however, I found that although all of these trends exhibit positive relationships as predicted, only clade age had a significant effect on body shape variation between carnivoran families. And this relationship suggests that body shape variation is primarily driven by evolutionary time, where older clades or older families simply had more time to accumulate more diverse body shapes compared to those younger families. So now moving on to the second question, I wanted to see how body size influences body shape variation. So here's just a simple plot of body size on the x-axis and ER on the y-axis. And using a PGLS, I found that body shape scales with negative allometry with respect to size. This means that larger species exhibit more robust bodies, whereas smaller species exhibit more elongate bodies. And the mechanical demands of terrestrial locomotion may contribute to this allometric trend. Specifically, larger animals require more robust bodies to support their heavier weights, whereas smaller bodies are more free to evolve increased body elongation so that they may be more flexible and exploit those prey items in crevices, burrows, and other small constricted spaces. In contrast, pinnipeds, which are the seals and sea lions, exhibit the opposite trend of terrestrial carnivorans, in which larger species were more elongate compared to smaller species. And a possible explanation for this positive trend is the balance between drag reduction and thermal regulation that pinnipeds must manage within the aquatic environment. So streamlined bodies reduce drag, but at a cost because it can also lead to heat loss. So perhaps that larger seals can overcome these disadvantages because of the relatively slower surface area to volume ratio just due to their enormous sizes. And therefore, they may have the luxury of exhibiting a more elongate body that is closer to the optimal fineness ratio without compensating those thermoregulatory needs or drag reduction during swimming. So now moving on to my last question, what are the skeletal components that contribute to body shape variation? Again, mammals can become more elongate through reduction of the body depth, elongation of the head, or elongation of individual vertebrae, specifically in the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral regions. What mammals, however, cannot do is increase their number of vertebrae to become more elongate or change their body shape just because of those vertebral constraints. So here's a scatter plot of those 6 components of body shape on the x-axis and ER on the y-axis. And using a phylogenetic multiple regression, I found that the lumbar region, followed by relative rib length, and the thoracic region all contributed the most to body shape variation across all carnivorans. So this indicates that evolutionary changes in body shapes in carnivorans were primarily achieved through that elongation and shortening of the thoracolumbar region. And this makes sense because the thoracic and lumbar regions of the vertebral column, along with the rib cage, are the primary structures used to support the body against gravity, as well as transmit and receive proportional forces to and from the limbs during locomotion. So therefore, elongation of these regions facilitates increased dorsal ventral flexibility, whereas shortening facilitates dorsal stability. And these patterns correspond to that allometric pattern that I found previously, where smaller species are more elongate and flexible, whereas larger species are more robust. So just to summarize, overall, we can say that carnivoran body shapes are quantitatively diverse, and that variation of that diversity accumulates with evolutionary time. Second, body shape scales with negative allometry, where smaller species are more elongate, whereas larger ones are more robust. And lastly, the thoracolumbar region, as well as the rib cage, best predicts body shape variation. So clearly, this is just the beginning of our understanding of body shape diversity in mammals. And I have a few ongoing projects that build upon this work, including examining how ecological traits influenced body shape evolution across carnivorans, patterns of convergence between superficially similar taxa that have been described as elongate for past centuries, questions about how body shape relates to the appendicular skeleton, and lastly, how does incorporating a fossil record allow us to better test the evolution of body shapes across carnivora and perhaps other stem carnivorous mammals. And with that, I would like to thank Charlene Santana, John Flynn, and Rob Boss, as well as my funding sources and all those museums where I got to visit and collect data from. And this work was just recently published in the journal Evolution. So if you want to read about it, feel free to check it out. Thank you.